cast into the wilderness. The wind swept across the barren plains, rattling the loose boards of the Carter homestead. Inside, Evelyn Carter lay trembling, cradling her newborn against her chest. Her body still ached from the ordeal of childbirth, but her heart throbbed with something far worse: dread. She had hoped, prayed, that a daughter would bring her husband some measure of tenderness. Instead, she saw the storm in his eyes before he even opened his mouth. Thomas Carter towered at the foot of the bed, his jaw set like stone. "A girl," he spat, voice sharp with contempt. "All that labor, all that suffering, and what do you give me? A useless girl." Evelyn's lips quivered, but she said nothing. Words had long proven dangerous with Thomas. She lowered her gaze, rocking her child, whose soft whimper filled the silence. To Evelyn, this baby was no disappointment. Clara, she had named her, silently, as though naming her daughter aloud might draw Thomas's wrath. Clara was warmth, life, and hope. But to her husband, she was a failure made flesh. Thomas's boots scraped against the floorboards as he paced, muttering, "I needed a son to carry the name, to work the land, to prove I am not cursed." He stopped, glaring at Evelyn with a disgust that burned deeper than the prairie sun. "You've shamed me." Her arms tightened protectively around Clara. "Please," she whispered, but the plea dissolved in the heavy air. Without another word, Thomas yanked open the door. The desert night howled outside, cold and merciless. He seized Evelyn by the arm, dragging her from the bed despite her weakness. Pain flared in her body, but she dared not resist. Clara let out a piercing cry, the sound slicing through the silence of the land. "You and your whelp out," Thomas roared, shoving her toward the darkness. "You'll not curse me further under this roof." The door slammed, and Evelyn was swallowed by the night. Barefoot, trembling, with only a thin shawl around her shoulders, she staggered into the wilderness. Her breath rose in clouds, each step heavier than the last. Clara's cries quieted into soft whimpers, as though the infant sensed her mother's despair. Evelyn pressed her lips to the child's forehead. "Hush, my darling. I'll keep you safe." Somehow, yet doubt gnawed at her, for the prairie was vast and merciless, and she had nowhere to go. Hours blurred into one another as she stumbled across uneven ground, guided only by starlight. The world seemed intent on her suffering. Rocks tore at her feet, the chills seeped into her bones, and the echo of Thomas's rejection weighed upon her spirit. Her mind circled a single, merciless truth. She had been cast out not just as a wife, but as a woman unworthy of even pity. Her knees buckled near the edge of a dry arroyo. Exhaustion overwhelmed her, and she sank into the dust, clutching Clara close to shield her from the bitter wind. Her eyelids fluttered. She prayed for strength, but darkness threatened to claim her. Then came the sound, subtle at first, the crunch of footsteps across sand. Her heart raced. Was it Thomas, come to drag her back only to punish her further? Or a wild animal prowling in search of prey? She lacked the strength to run. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and steady. The moonlight caught the details of his face, strong, weathered features marked by the desert sun. His long hair was bound with a strip of leather, and his dark eyes carried not judgment, but concern. He approached slowly, hands open to show he meant no harm. Evelyn tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped her lips. The man crouched beside her, studying Clara's fragile form and the pale weakness of Evelyn's face. He spoke in a low, calm voice, his words unfamiliar yet soothing. After a moment, he shifted to broken English. "You are hurt," he said gently. "Come, I help." Tears stung Evelyn's eyes. Never had Thomas spoken with such gentleness. She wanted to protest, to cling to the remnants of pride that told her she must not trust a stranger, least of all a man from a people Thomas scorned. But survival outweighed hesitation. He extended his hand. After a long pause, Evelyn placed her trembling fingers in his. His grip was firm, steady, grounding her against the chaos of her thoughts. He lifted her carefully, supporting both mother and child as though their weight meant nothing to him. For the first time since her banishment, Evelyn felt something other than despair. She felt seen. The stranger guided her toward the shelter of the mesas, where the land rose into protective cliffs. The night was still long, and danger lingered, but Evelyn's heart carried a fragile spark of hope. Clara stirred in her arms, soothed by the steady rhythm of the man's stride. As dawn hinted at the horizon, Evelyn's mind lingered on the face of the stranger who had saved her. His name, she would soon learn, was Ahyv, and though she could not yet fathom it, his presence would ignite a conflict far greater than her husband's cruelty, a conflict born not of hatred, but of forbidden love, the shelter of kindness. The first rays of dawn painted the cliffs in bands of amber and rose as Evelyn stirred within the shelter of stone. She had drifted into restless sleep against the warmth of the stranger's fire. Clara nestled safely in her arms. For a moment, waking felt like stepping into a dream. The cries of her child softened by the hush of the desert, the harshness of Thomas's voice replaced by the crackle of flames. Then memory returned, heavy and sharp. She had been cast out. She was no longer a wife, but an exile. The man who had found her knelt nearby, grinding herbs with careful precision. He glanced up as she shifted, his dark eyes steady, his expression unreadable yet gentle. "You wake," he said simply, his voice carrying the cadence of someone in used English, but determined to bridge the space between them. Evelyn nodded, her throat dry. "Ah, yes. Thank you." He dipped his head in acknowledgement, then reached for a clay bowl filled with water. "Drink. You are weak." She accepted it, her hands trembling. The water tasted of earth and stone, but it steadied her. Clara stirred, fussing in hunger, and Evelyn adjusted her shawl to nurse the child. Heat rose in her cheeks at the presence of the man, but he respectfully turned his gaze toward the fire as though to grant her privacy. That small courtesy pricked her heart more sharply than cruelty ever had. When Clara was settled once more, the man spoke again. "I am Ahyv," he said, tapping his chest. "Evelyn," she replied softly. Her voice caught on the name, as though speaking it in this new world of stone and silence might sever her from the life she had left behind. They regarded one another for a long moment. Evelyn wanted to ask why he had helped her. She wanted to ask if he had a family, if he knew what it meant to be rejected by one's own. But words tangled in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "You saved us." Ahiv's gaze shifted to Clara, then back to Evelyn. No child should be cold in night. No mother alone. His tone carried no judgment, only quiet conviction. Evelyn's eyes burned, though she fought against the tears. Thomas had never spoken with such certainty on her behalf. His words had been commands, punishments, demands for obedience. Yet here was a man who owed her nothing, offering her dignity with no expectation in return. Gratitude welled within her, heavy and dangerous, for it carried with it something else, an awareness of the forbidden line she stood upon. The day stretched forward in simple tasks. I had built a small fire of juniper branches, their resinous smoke curling toward the sky. He prepared a broth from dried corn and herbs, offering her the first taste before taking any himself. Evelyn forced herself to eat despite the hollowness of her stomach. Each act of kindness pressed against the walls of her heart, weakening her resolve to remain untouched by it. As the sun climbed higher, Clara grew restless. Ahyv surprised Evelyn by extending his arms, silently asking to hold the child. She hesitated. Thomas had never once cradled their daughter, not even at her birth. But exhaustion weighed on her, and something in Ahiv's calm presence urged her to trust. Slowly, she placed Clara in his arms. The sight pierced her deeply. His rough, calloused hands cradled the infant with astonishing gentleness. Clara, who often fussed in discomfort, quieted almost instantly. Evelyn found herself staring, a knot rising in her throat. This was how she had dreamed her husband might have been, steady, protective, tender. The realization struck like a blade. She was comparing them. Worse still, she found her heart leaning toward the man who was not her husband. When evening came, Evelyn sat near the fire while Ahyv repaired a torn strap of his satchel. The silence between them grew weighted, not with discomfort, but with something unspoken. Shadows played across the walls of the stone shelter, flickering as if they carried secrets neither dared voice. Finally, Evelyn broke the quiet. "Thomas, my husband," the word tasted bitter. "He cast us out. He said a daughter was a curse." Ahyv's hand stilled, though he did not look up. His voice was low, steady. "A child is gift. Boy or girl, only foolish man sees curse." Her chest tightened. To hear her truth named aloud without scorn felt like a balm. Yet it also carried a danger sharper than any blade. If she allowed herself to linger in that balm, she might never escape it. Night deepened. Clara slept soundly, swaddled against Evelyn's side. Across the fire, Ahyv leaned back against the stone, eyes half closed. Evelyn should have felt safe in his presence, but instead she felt restless. A forbidden thought crept into her mind. What if she never returned to Thomas? What if she stayed here with a man who had shown her in 2 days more kindness than she had known in years? The thought shamed her, yet it also warmed her, like the glow of the fire seeping into her bones. She lay awake long after Ahyv's breathing steadied into sleep, staring at the shifting shadows on the stone. Her heart whispered what her mind refused to accept. Survival had led her here, but something deeper was taking root. When dawn came again, Evelyn knew that a new conflict had taken hold of her. She was no longer simply a woman cast aside. She was a woman who had begun to see another path, though it was lined with thorns of guilt and danger. And that realization, more than the wilderness itself, frightened her. The forbidden flame. The desert had a way of softening time. Days melted into one another, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. For Evelyn, those days with Ahyv became both a sanctuary and a trap. She had come to his shelter broken, cast out like a shadow, yet now she found herself reluctant to imagine leaving. Safety had blossomed into something more dangerous. Comfort. Ahyv worked with quiet efficiency, teaching her small tasks: how to grind corn, how to shape clay for water vessels, how to read the signs of weather in the shifting winds. Evelyn listened, eager to learn, yet distracted by his nearness. Each time his hand brushed hers as he guided her movements, a shiver rippled through her body. She told herself it was only gratitude, only admiration for his patience. But when she lay awake at night, staring into the firelight, she could no longer deny the truth. Her heart was straying. It began one evening when a storm rolled across the desert. The sky darkened with violent clouds, thunder cracking so loudly it shook the walls of stone. Evelyn huddled close to Clara, but the infant slept peacefully, lulled by the rhythm of rain on rock. Lightning slashed across the horizon, casting fleeting, brilliant light into the shelter. In those moments, Evelyn saw Ahyv's face in stark relief. The strength in his jaw, the calm in his eyes, the gentleness that contradicted every cruelty Thomas had ever inflicted. When the wind howled through the canyon, Evelyn startled. Instinct drove her closer to Ahyv, who sat beside her, steady as stone. He placed a reassuring hand over hers. The contact was brief, but it sent warmth coursing through her veins, banishing the chill of fear. She looked at him. In the firelit shadows, their gazes locked. No words passed between them. None were needed. The silence was charged, humming with all that had been left unsaid. Evelyn's breath caught as Ahyv's fingers lingered, hesitant but unwilling to pull away. Her heart pounded with guilt. She was a wife, bound by vows, even if cast aside. Yet another truth drowned out the voice of duty. She had never once felt cherished in her marriage. The storm raged, but within the shelter a different tempest brewed. Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling, "I should not." Ahyv's voice was low, steady, yet strained. "You are not safe with him. You deserve more." Her chest tightened at the words. To hear another man speak not of possession, but of worth unsettled her deeply. Her lips parted to protest, but instead she found herself leaning closer, drawn as if by gravity itself. His hand rose, brushing a damp lock of hair from her cheek. The simple touch undid her. Then, before reason could intervene, their lips met. The kiss was tentative at first, restrained by hesitation, but when Evelyn did not pull away, it deepened. For a fleeting moment, she surrendered to the warmth of his embrace, to the safety that felt like passion, to the forbidden joy of being wanted. The fire crackled, rain drummed, and the world beyond ceased to exist. When at last they parted, Evelyn gasped, trembling. She pressed her forehead to his chest, torn between elation and despair. "I have sinned," she whispered, clutching Clara closer as if the child's innocence might shield her from the truth. Ahyv's hand rested gently on her shoulder. "Your husband threw you away. You owe him nothing." Yet Evelyn knew it was not so simple. Though cast aside, she remained bound in spirit, and breaking those bonds felt like stepping into a darkness she might never escape. Still, the thought of returning to Thomas, of enduring again his cruelty, was unbearable. Here, beside Ahyv, she felt alive. The storm began to ease, thunder rolling into the distance. Clara stirred and whimpered, pulling Evelyn back into the moment. She rocked her daughter, forcing her breath to steady, but the taste of Ahyv's kiss lingered, haunting and sweet. That night, she lay awake long after Ahyv's breathing slowed in sleep. Guilt gnawed at her, whispering that she had betrayed her vows. Yet another voice, quieter but insistent, whispered that what she had found was not betrayal but truth, a glimpse of the love she had always been denied. The conflict burned within her, unresolved. She was caught between two worlds, the one that bound her to a man who had cast her out, and the one that beckoned her with forbidden promise. And though she feared the cost, she knew the choice would soon come. For storms, whether of sky or heart, always left a reckoning in their wake. The choice of love. The desert morning dawned, deceptively calm. Pale light washed across the cliffs, touching the stone shelter with a fragile glow. Evelyn sat near the fire, Clara cradled against her breast, her mind restless after a night of uneasy dreams. The memory of Ahyv's kiss still haunted her, a secret flame she both cherished and feared. Yet beneath that warmth lay a deeper unease. Something in the air felt wrong, as if the silence before a storm had settled upon them again. Her unease proved true when a shadow fell across the entrance. Evelyn stiffened, her heart seizing in her chest. There, framed by the rising sun, stood Thomas Carter. His hat brim cast his eyes into shadow, but the cruel twist of his mouth was unmistakable. "So if it's true," he sneered, stepping inside without invitation. The whore didn't die in the wilderness. She found herself a savage to warm her bed. Evelyn rose quickly, clutching Clara tighter, her pulse hammering. Shame battled fury inside her, but fury won. "You cast us out," she said, her voice trembling yet louder than she thought possible. "You left me and your daughter to die." Thomas's laugh was sharp, bitter. "That squalling brat isn't mine. She's my disgrace." His gaze snapped to Ahyv, who had stepped forward, silent but unflinching. "And you, thief, keeping what belongs to me." Ahyv's voice was calm, measured, yet steel lay beneath it. "She is not yours. Not if you treat her as nothing." Thomas's hand drifted toward the revolver at his hip. The motion sent a chill racing through Evelyn's veins. She had seen that weapon in a man's life before, quick as lightning. Her breath caught, her body frozen between fear for Ahyv and the instinct to protect her child. But Ahyv did not move with fear. He stepped between Evelyn and Thomas, his frame a shield of quiet strength. "You want fight," he said, his tone low. "But fight me, not her." Thomas's rage flared. "You think you can take what's mine? You think you're better than me? She's my wife, and no heathen will steal her." Evelyn's voice broke through, raw with defiance. "I'm not yours, Thomas. You lost that right when you threw us into the night." Her words seemed to strike harder than any blade. For the first time, Thomas faltered, his pride cracking beneath the weight of her rejection. But the crack only deepened his fury. With a growl, he drew the revolver, pointing it at Ahyv's chest. Time slowed. Evelyn's scream lodged in her throat. Clara stirred, sensing her mother's terror. Ahyv stood firm, unmoving, his dark eyes locked on Thomas. Then, with a swiftness Evelyn scarcely believed, He lunged, striking the revolver aside. The gunshot cracked, echoing through the canyon, but the bullet buried itself harmlessly in stone. The men struggled, fury against resolve. Dust rose, the fire toppled, sparks scattering. Evelyn pressed against the wall, clutching Clara, her heart a drum of terror. Thomas swung wildly, but Ahyv moved with controlled precision, each motion shaped by survival. With one final surge, he disarmed Thomas, sending the revolver skittering across the stone floor. Breathless, Thomas stumbled, beaten not only in strength but in spirit. His chest heaved, his face twisted with disbelief. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sharp with a courage she never thought herself capable of. "Leave," she commanded. "You have no power here. Not over me. Not over her." Thomas's eyes, once filled with arrogant certainty, now flickered with something hollow. He spat into the dust, muttered a curse, and staggered toward the entrance. Before disappearing into the blinding sun, he turned, his voice hoarse with venom. "You'll regret this, woman. Both of you." Then he was gone, swallowed by the desert. Silence fell, broken only by Clara's soft whimper. Evelyn's knees gave way, and she sank to the ground, tears spilling freely. Relief, fear, and something greater washed through her in waves. Ahyv knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You are free now," he said quietly. Evelyn looked up, meeting his gaze. In those dark eyes, she saw not possession, not pity, but recognition of her pain, her strength, her choice. The forbidden flame that had once filled her with guilt now felt like truth. She had crossed the line, but in doing so, she had reclaimed herself. She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "Not ever." Ahiv's lips curved, not in triumph, but in quiet understanding. "Then we make new path. Together." Outside, the desert stretched vast and endless, no longer a wasteland but a horizon of possibility. Evelyn rose, Clara in her arms, Ahyv at her side. The scars of betrayal would remain, but so too would the fire of resilience. For the first time since her exile, she did not fear the road ahead. She had chosen, and though the choice was born of forbidden love, it was hers. The wind carried the scent of rain, and the desert, at last, seemed to breathe with her.